Thomas here with Much Props, going to give you another how-to video. Today I am building something for my Viking cosplay. Now I made this thing quite a while back and it's something that I typically wear when we go to Ren Fair because it's relatively comfortable minus all the armor bits. So I like to kind of dress comfortably. That being said, one of the problems that we always tend to have when we go to the Ren Fair is carrying stuff. Now we may make purchases from time to time, or even the booklet that has like the time periods for all the performances and stuff. Like you don't want to just carry that in your hand the whole time. So I wanted to carry around a backpack instead of, say, a shield on my back. So make it practical and comfortable and hopefully look cool. So I'm gonna take some liberties with the time period. It's not going to be time period accurate, but it is going to look cool, hopefully. I am going to try my hand at actually making a leather bag from scratch, like hand stitching the whole thing. What have I gotten myself into? Today we're making a backpack. Let's get to building. So I bought lots of stuff for this build, mainly because I have never tried something of this magnitude, and I just started buying things that I thought I might need, some of which we'll definitely not use for this video. I'll just add it to the ridiculous amount of other craft supplies that I am hoarding. At some point I'll have enough to open my own craft store of the most random hobbies out there. I got several different types of leather, pre-dyed, and even got some pre-embossed bits to help me save some time. I will try to put together a list just in case any of you want to follow my crazy self and make your own bag. I got belts and beads and resin skulls and a number of other embellishments that I ended up not having time to put onto the bag, but definitely will probably add to it in the future. Along with the hoarding of craft materials, I'm also slowly building up tools, fasteners, and other accessories to do all the random crafts I dabble in. I have several leather making kits that either someone gifted me or I bought on a late night Amazon raid. I'm not going to pretend to know what all of these tools are or what they actually are intended to be used for, but I'm gonna do my best to stumble through this and try and help you out somewhat, I guess. I follow several leather workers here on YouTube like Prince Armory, Weaver's Leather Supply, Dark Horse Workshop, and Skilltree. They all have tremendous videos of expertise on leatherworking stuff that you could definitely go watch. I also watched dozens of videos on making leather bags specifically before even hitting the record button to build this video. It was one of those things where I felt intimidated to start, but eventually mustered up the courage to dive in. I spent several hours planning out how big I wanted my backpack, what style I wanted, and how to incorporate the size of the materials that I had into a coherent pattern for this build. These were a general rough idea more than a definite answer to how I was going to construct the backpack. While I have thousands of hours making foam props and other things and have hundreds of templates for build videos, this is the first one I've ever specifically made for leather products. Not to mention that this is also my first bag template. It was funny, after sketching everything out on poster board, I sat for about 2 hours just staring at my materials, hoping that I wouldn't mess this up. The materials were a lot more expensive than I'm used to on a build, and I knew that if I messed up, I couldn't get replacement materials ordered and delivered in time to meet my deadline for this trip. So with a deep breath, I took my awl and scored the leather, and then used a skiving knife to cut out the leather. This is a leather strap cutter. It has a small blade wedged into the far end of the 2 pieces of wood opposite of the handle. You set the width you want and pull the leather through. I had a difficult time trying to pull the maximum 4 inches through it, so after making a beginning notch on the leather with my hobby knife, I ripped 4-inch wide pieces of the dark brown leather for the band that's going to go around the bottom of my bag. If there are any leather workers watching this video, I apologize in advance for all the many misuses of any of these tools that I have. I'm trying to teach myself on the fly, and there are a lot of helpful doodads that I need to get the hang of. If you have any suggestions for leatherworking channels to watch, please let me know down in the comments below. At the end of this clip, I'm thinning out the edges of the strips, which I believe is called skiving, in order to allow my first ever attempt at a French seam to make the 2 strips one piece and add some rigidity to the base of my bag. Busting out more tools, I bought a rubber mat to dampen the hammer and not punch through my cutting material, as well as protecting the tools. I also got a stitching pony, thinking that it would help me to hold pieces together as I saddle stitched bits together. As my parts got bigger, the stitching pony became less helpful and more cumbersome, and I resorted to just awkwardly contorting my body into any position I could to get a good angle on the never-ending stitching. So if you're not familiar with the process, here's the gist of what I've figured out. You take a stitching chisel and punch a stitch hole for your needle to go through. With leather needles and waxed faux sinew thread, you then sew up the seam. Saddle stitching means you are running 2 needles, a front and a back, or an inside and an outside, through each hole and pulling it tight. The wax on the thread helps to keep the thread tightly together. Saddle stitching is supposed to be one of the strongest and sturdiest stitches in leatherworking, so I figured I might as well use it on the entire bag. My hands do not appreciate this. Now, once these two strips were sewn together, I'm going to make what is known as a French seam. The thinning out of the edges was so that I could glue the inside flaps on themselves, making it a consistent thickness across the piece and hiding the seam in the middle of the leather. This also stiffens that area up, making it more rigid. I put one in the middle on both the front and the back of the bag. I spread some contact cement on the areas that the flaps will touch each other and then hit the parts flat with a leather mallet made out of a soft nylon to try and limit the marring of the leather. It's kind of hard to get good angles on any of this stuff because my hands or a tool is covering most of the work I am doing, so I try to get a better shot here for you. This hammer is called a rounded maul. It works similar to the mallet I used in the previous shot. I'm just trying to figure out which one is more comfortable for which application. For me, it kind of felt like the mallet was better for the hammering, the chisel part, and the maul was better for tamping down the seams. For some reason, I didn't record myself stitching the bottom together, but it was pretty straightforward, awkwardly trying to get the hang of stitching through 2 layers of 2mm thick genuine leather. Because I didn't know if my patterns would fully work, I relied on contact cement holding the parts together first and then punching through the stitching holes in the outer piece with an awl to make sure my holes matched up. I know this isn't the most efficient way, but I was figuring it out as I went. With my side panel and my back piece stitched together, I tacked them together with contact cement to the bottom and sewed it. I was surprised at how good this thing was looking, especially being my first leather bag I've ever made. I cut out this leaf shape into my green leather and carved out the midrib and veins of what a leaf has using a leather groover. Now I'm attaching this flap to the back panel, which sticks out just a little bit further than the sides. To make my seam lines for my stitches even across the edge, I used an edge stitching groover to mark out where the line is. This line acts as a guide to help me reference the chisel on as I'm hammering it across. I used a 6-stitch chisel because it was the largest one that I had. It meant the fewer hammer swings I had to give. Once you punch through your initial one, you line up the next punch with the last hole, overlapping it. For all of my joinery, I only used 1 stitch line, but for the flap, I wanted it to be super sturdy, so I used 2 rows. My bag is going to be closed by a drawstring made out of leather cordage. You could just punch a hole and run your cordage through, but I know over time that hole near the edge is eventually going to rip or stretch out as the bag is open, closed, and pulled tightly together. So I am going to add some extra rigidity to those openings by hammering on some grommets. These are little pieces of metal that get smashed into each other with a special little plate. It forces the metal to bend on itself, locking it into the leather. I space them out evenly on my backpack all the way around the bag. Now to make it a backpack and also give myself the ability to add a little fur bedroll on the bottom, I'm going to add a bunch of D-rings fixed to leather straps and then sew this to the bottom and the sides of the bag. I put a total of 8 of these applications to the bag, 4 on the bottom to run the green belt that I showed you at the beginning through, which will hold the fur bedroll, and the other 4 are on the top and sides of the backpack for the straps. I'll admit I stayed up super late the night before we were going to leave, woke up super early the day of, and then delayed the departure after I got home from work because I was adding these straps and trying to wrap up the build. I worked on this on and off for about 2 weeks, in between working on my wife's costume, making trinkets to take for the fairy garden, and working on another bit that I actually didn't finish in time but will be the last part of this build next week. The last thing to do is make the strapping for the backpack. I had some belt roller buckles and sliders to help keep the strapping in place. I punched holes for the buckles to go through, then stitched them closed. After walking around with this backpack for a day at the Ren Fair, I might go back and add some padding inserts to distribute the weight a little bit better on my shoulders. It wasn't too bad, but by the end of the day, it was digging into my traps and became a little uncomfortable. Of all the things that I have built over the years, I feel like this is one of the most professional looking things I've ever created. And it started with an intimidating feeling, hesitation, and self-doubt. Let my backpack adventure be a testament to just go for it. You never know where your crafting will go. All you have to do is have the courage to take the first step. I can't wait to show you the last thing I'm adding to this bag for a future adventure. Stay tuned for the next week's video. It might be one of the coolest liquid containers you've ever seen. And we are finished. Here is the end result. Overall, I think it turned out pretty awesome. While it does look relatively large on a normal person, putting it on my back, it does kind of shrink down a bit. So if I was to do this again, I would probably make it a little bit taller, but I was limited by the materials that I had, so I had to kind of build with it as it was. But I like the mixture of tones. I also like the tooled in embossments on the leather on the green parts, and I think I definitely gained a bigger appreciation for those of you who do leather work, because my hands were bruised and raw so bad for the past 2 weeks trying to get this thing done. Definitely underestimating how long this would take. Maybe you will try and make one of these yourselves and impress your friends with your ability to go outside of your comfort zone, try something that you've only saw other people do, and realize it may not be that easy. Yeah. Maybe you'll get some.
Yay!
And inevitably, they're going to ask you, how'd you make that? You can give them one of these, tell them, much props. Time to pack this stuff up and get going. Peace! If you enjoy what I do here on YouTube and you want to see more builds like this one, please consider joining these awesome people listed here with me over on my Patreon to build a bigger, better, more creative community together.